Hello and welcome. We're coming to you live at our special time from the Democratic National Convention in Denver, Colorado. Now, as the battle over energy policy and what to do about the ever-increasing cost of fuel rages, the question over how to deal with it has become particularly contentious to the US presidential candidates. Environmentalists argue that the world must look beyond oil and invest in alternative energies. Conservatives believe that the most immediate solution lies in new sources, including controversial offshore drilling. While policymakers debate the issue, the ones paying the highest price are those that can least afford it, the poor. On today's show, we talk with two activists on either side of the issue and ask which energy solution is right for those struggling to make ends meet. Well, joining me here in Denver are Riz Khan from the Congress of Racial Equality. He takes a civil rights approach to the energy crisis, arguing that by not exploring all avenues, including drilling, liberals are contributing to a war on the poor. Also joining me is Carl Pope, Executive Director of the Sierra Club. He's also author of the book Strategic Ignorance, Why the Bush Administration is Recklessly Destroying a Century of Environmental Progress. Gentlemen, I welcome you to the program.
It's good to be on with you.
Thank you, sir. Now, Riz, if I could ask you, first of all, to address the issue of energy. Of course, Al Gore will be speaking later at the convention, so energy is going to be very high on the agenda. And I look at your organization, and you seem to have ended up with some very strange bedfellows. You've got, you're advocating for the poorest people in America who are really struggling with the fuel prices, and yet here you are finding common ground with oil companies, big business, and to some degree the Republican Party. So, I mean, how does that work out? Are you comfortable with that?
Well, we're very comfortable with promoting our position, and whoever happens to join on our position is fine and dandy as far as we're concerned. Look, the fact of the matter is that the Congress of Racial Equality is a 66-year-old human and civil rights organization. We've been fighting for the rights of minorities and poor people in the United States and around the world for over 6 decades. So we see this as just another continuation and the new threshold of that fight. We're going to be releasing a study. In fact, we're having a press conference tomorrow at the Hyatt Regency where we're going to be releasing a study that shows, and we got these statistics from the Energy Department, that the average American family spends 5 cents on the dollar on high energy prices. Low income, 20 cents on the dollar. For poor people, those families that fall below that poverty threshold, they spend 50 cents on the dollar. That is a crisis. That's 50 cents on the dollar that is not spent towards health care. That's 50 cents on the dollar that's not spent towards education or other necessities of life for our people. So as far as we're concerned, frankly, this debate is often focused on environmentalists versus the oil companies. The missing element in this debate and in this discussion that we are addressing is the poor consumer.
Now I should explain, so basically they're losing half their income effectively to energy. Now let me put an email to you that came in from New Zealand. And this came in from Zelina Hamilton in New Zealand, and says, in Hamilton in New Zealand, says, we can only count on 2 things, the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. Unless mankind has a change of heart, nothing will get better. And I'm sorry to say, she says, Riz is only adding more hot air. Now, your critics say this position on energy and fuel is not so much because of your interest in the plight of the poor, but it's actually a result of being funded by, for example, ExxonMobil. So how do you answer those critics?
Well, first of all, I would answer that critic by saying that, as I said, CORE is a 6-decade-plus human rights organization with chapters all over the world. We have over 100,000 contributors to the Congress of Racial Equality, and I guarantee you, ExxonMobil's contribution to the organization, we have a variety from members to corporations to small businesses to a variety of entities. And by the way, our funding is a fraction of the funding that my good friend Carl gets and the Sierra Club gets. The fact of the matter is that ExxonMobil's contribution to the Congress of Racial Equality that we welcome is such a small, infinitesimal part of our budget. It has no real meaning. And one of the things, by the way, that ExxonMobil supports is a Martin Luther King celebration, which we have in January in New York City, one of the largest celebrations in the world. And one of the things that ExxonMobil, in particular, along with other companies, support is our anti-malaria efforts on the continent of Africa, where we, just like we do with energy, we call for a comprehensive approach to fighting energy and high energy prices. We call for a comprehensive approach to fighting the scourge of malaria that is killing millions of Africans, including using DDT,
now,
which I think Carl and I were going to have some issues over.
Well, I'll touch on more on the energy issue from your perspective in a second, but Carl Pope, great to have you with us as well, sir. And basically, Niger Innes, his organization himself, they advocate the idea of any energy option to try to reduce poverty. Now, to some degree, don't they have, aren't they making a point that all energy options should be on the table for the poor?
Well, the answer is we should use the energy options that are good for the poor, and he's very right. Energy is a huge crisis for the poor. It's a crisis in this country. It's even more of a crisis overseas. If you go into a small village in most of India or most of Africa, the energy economy people are living off of has only two ingredients: cattle dung and kerosene. They don't even have electricity. We are not actually going to be able to solve that problem by drilling for oil. We're going to need to solve that problem with 21st century solutions. I was in India in March, and already we were beginning to see villages in India where every house had been equipped with a solar cell and an LED light bulb. Villages in India that were, in that one sense, technologically more sophisticated than what we have in the US. That's the 21st century future, but what we do have to make sure is that as we launch the future, we bring the entire world along. We can't afford to leave half of the world's population out of the green energy economy as we did out of the fossil fuel economy.
But of course, Carl, the demands in India are far less than in the US. They couldn't survive on those kind of energy generations, you know, from a solar panel and an LED and so on. So there is that issue of comparison has to be fair.
Well, if Americans want to consume more energy, I think Americans should pay the full price. And the reality is, we in this country, especially the rich in this country, have gotten used to exporting the costs of the energy we consume to places like the Niger Delta and the rainforest in Ecuador. We are not paying the real cost of what we're using. And in this century, I don't think it's going to be a fossil fuel century, and it's not going to be a century where one region provides fuel for everybody else. We're all going to learn to grow our own fuel supplies at home, because one of the wonderful things about the sun and the wind, every country can be a Saudi Arabia of sun or wind. There is no country on the planet that can't generate its own energy from renewables.
Riz, I'd just love to comment on some of the things that Carl has been saying. You know, I've just been, we have chapters in Uganda, and I've been talking with our people on the ground on the continent of Africa, and unfortunately, I agree with Carl. Right now, there are people all over the developing world that are using cow dung for energy to survive. Those folk, our people, our members, want access to energy of all sources. The fact is that environmentalists, unfortunately, environmentalists, I'm sure you're well-meaning, where environmentalists based in Europe and the United States go into the developing world, go into places like Uganda, and stop electrical grids from being built. These folk want access to energy just like Americans do here. And by the way, we don't believe in pitting renewables versus fossil fuels. We say, as Mao Zedong said, let all flowers bloom. We believe in it all. We believe in doing alternatives, but we also know that to have wind power and have viable wind power, you're going to have natural gas, and you're going to have to dig for natural gas. To us to get to that alternative future that we both want to get to, you're going to have to use traditional fossil fuels to get there.
But Nigel, I've got to quote you. You've been quoted as saying, you're fearful of environmental activists having a disproportionate impact on policy. What makes you think they have that much influence?
Well, there's no question. In fact, one of the press conferences that we're going to have tomorrow is exposing the politicians in Washington that are not paying attention to their constituents and their voters, that are paying more attention to the very powerful, well-funded environmental lobby. You know, we're creating a deck of cards, if you will, and rating them, or low rating them based on their not embracing a comprehensive energy approach. We have Nancy Pelosi, who just spoke here at the convention. She's our first one out of the box because she has a disastrous environmental policy. She is not being responsible to the people of the United States that call for energy across the board, alternatives like Carl would like, but fossil fuels as well, and more drilling here, now, immediately.
All right, let me get a call in. Carl, before you respond, let's get a call in. We've got Mehdi on the line from California. Glad you could join us. What's your question, please?
Yes, sir. Thank you for taking my call. My question is, how long do we have to wait for all of these promises from government? Because all the government connected or related to the oil company. I'm asking these two gentlemen and every other authority, how could people go to work with $6.50 minimum wage? You tell me, especially in America.
I'm going to put that question to Carl Pope. And actually, what Mehdi in California is saying is, look, how long do we have to wait for the government's promises to come to fruit and to realize, some kind of alternative?
Well, we actually, in this country, 40% of the new electricity that came online last year was from wind. we actually can move very rapidly if we get government leadership in this country. Germany, which after all doesn't actually have a lot of sunshine, is actually the leader in solar power in the world. And Denmark, which doesn't have a lot of wind, is leading wind power because they have government leadership. What every nation needs is leadership that recognizes that we all need a diversity of energy sources, and yes, we're going to have some fossil fuels. That's not really the issue, and I have to make the note that we do have a larger budget than the Congress of Racial Equality, but when you put our spending...
Much larger.
But when you put it up next to ExxonMobil, we are the flea on the dog, and I'm not worried about their being outspent.
Let me put an email question to you, though, Carl. This came in from the UK, from Lilia Patterson. And Lilia wrote in saying, corporations that are causing massive social and environmental destruction should be fined. Those penalties could be used to lower fuel costs so that the poor no longer bear the burden of others' actions. Now, I wonder, is this a viable proposition? What about Senator Obama's call for a windfall profits tax on energy companies?
Well, it's even worse in the United States. Right now, in addition to the profits the oil industries are earning, every American taxpayer is paying taxes every year to give them $13 billion in cash. We could stop by no longer giving taxpayers money to profitable oil companies, and then we actually should say, you know something? If you do damage to a community, you ought to pay the people in that community. If you're Shell Oil and you're destroying the Niger Delta, you have a duty to make it whole. But when Exxon did that in Alaska in this country, the U.S. Supreme Court just ruled there's one law for the rest of us. ExxonMobil gets off free.
I'm going to ask you gentlemen to stand by because we have to take a very short break here. Don't go away. After the break, we'll be back with more of our debate from the 2008 Democratic Convention. Now, first, we asked people around the world what they wanted from the next U.S. president. This is what they had to say to us.
I would like next U.S. president to think about peace in the world and think about the poor people in the world and stop spending his money on wars and aid people around the world.
Oh, well, I would like the next U.S. president to, I think, to contribute more in developing other countries which are like in third class now.
The way they control us in Africa, the countries, the way they come and affect our decisions, they should not interfere. Let them assist, but not interfere even in decision making.